Hey folks, I didn't expect to be making another video on a disappearance in Scotland so soon right after the last one, but while I was researching Neil Skinner's case, I came across the Scottish YouTuber Finn Creaney. Finn was a talented bushcraft expert, a talented musician, and survivalist YouTuber whose channel was just getting off the ground. He vanished without a trace on the 25th of March 2022 during what should have been a routine solo hiking and camping trip. His disappearance sparked exhaustive, large-scale search efforts by the police, many volunteers and specialised teams, fueling endless speculation about what happened to him when they came up with nothing. To appreciate why the case is so unusual, it's worth noting that in Scotland, around 1,000 people go missing in the Highlands each year, and around 17,000 people from the country as a whole. According to the HM Inspectorate of Constabulary in Scotland, 99% of missing persons are found each year, with over 94% being found within 48 hours. Finn's disappearance, however, stands out for many reasons. For one, he was just never found, but also because he wasn't just a novice hiker, rather he taught survival skills in these areas for a living, making his disappearance all the more unusual. Finn was born in Scotland on the 19th of December 1989 and grew up immersed in nature, spending countless hours exploring forests and learning wilderness skills that likely shaped his self-reliant spirit and love for solo wild camping. In his teens and early adulthood, Finn's interests diversified, though he never lost his love for the wilderness. He became a musician and guitarist and would perform locally in small venues around Easter Ross. This period of time was not without its struggles for him though. He faced some mental health challenges which he openly discussed in a 2011 Ross-shire Journal interview, emphasising the importance of opening up and talking about these kinds of problems. Finn would end up being known as a devoted husband to his wife, Lucy, and a devoted father to his daughter, Luna, who was just 4 years old when he disappeared. Outside of this, he founded Wildcat Bushcraft, which was a thriving school that he taught survival skills in the Highlands. In January of 2021, Finn launched his YouTube channel, where he would post solo adventure vlogs and survival techniques. After just 9 videos, he hit around 1,500 subscribers, and likely would have gained a much larger audience if he'd have been here longer. In the weeks preceding the 25th of March 2022, Finn meticulously planned a solo weekend hiking and camping trip to film an episode for his YouTube channel. The route was approximately 30 air miles, though obviously longer on foot, and started near Loch Naver in Sutherland. This is a body of water measuring about 6 miles long from its furthest points, and around 600 metres wide, to a depth of about 33 metres. From there, he had planned to hike south towards Golspie Beach on the east coast. While not an exact path that he'd taken before, it did still align with his familiarity of highland terrain. Finn had planned to find somewhere to camp overnight and capture some footage of his travels and to demonstrate some more survival techniques. He had promised and was supposed to be back home by midday on the 27th of March to help Lucy with Mother's Day flower deliveries for her florist business that she'd started and was making a success of. Before we go any further, if I could just ask you to like the video and hype it, then I would appreciate that very much, and please consider turning on notifications for the channel and subscribing if you haven't already. Finn's prep work before the hike had been thorough. He didn't drive to the loch, but instead drove all the way to the end point at Golspie first. Then from there, a family member drove him all the way back to the starting point at the loch. This was a good idea, as it meant that it was just much easier to get home on his own terms once he'd finished the long hike. The weather forecast for that weekend was unseasonably warm, with temperatures between 16 and 20 degrees Celsius, or somewhere between 60 and 68 Fahrenheit. He packed lightly that day, but still appropriately as he always did. He took a rucksack with supplies and clothing that gave him good breathability, though he also had some things that would keep him warm too should things change. Finn was said to be very excited about this trip and was eager to put together a new video for his audience on YouTube. The morning of the 25th went as per usual, and he packed up and got ready to get on with his journey. He said his farewells to Lucy and Luna at their home. Now with the family member following in tow, they drove to Golspie Beach, packed up and was then on their way to the loch in this second car. At 12:52 PM, while driving towards the drop-off point, Finn called Lucy and left her a message through voicemail. Everyone knew that he absolutely loved his family and he was quite an affectionate person, especially to his family. He basically just told her that he loved her and that he was very proud of her in that she was doing so well with her own business. Of course, after this incident unfolded, that was a message that would be speculated about and dissected online for any potential hidden meanings. However, both family members and investigators interpreted it as just being affectionate and not anything more than that. At 1:47 PM, his phone signal was last picked up in Lairg village as they'd driven through or past it. Sometime after that, it appears as though the phone went offline for some reason as a signal was never detected from it again. Meaning either it had been switched off at some point, the battery had been depleted, or perhaps it became damaged somehow. This was unusual and considered out of character, as he would usually keep his phone active on him for filming and navigation. He arrived at the remote starting point on the B873 road near Loch Naver at around 2:15 PM. I believe it was around here, which was not too far away from the caravan park in Altnahara. I'm not sure if you would have expected to get a phone signal at this exact place that he was dropped off, though some say there is enough network coverage there. This is important and integral information to the whole disappearance, because it's not clear if he turned the phone off while inside the car, or perhaps later when hiking alone around the loch. It could have been a situation in which he realised that the battery was lower than he liked and switched it off to preserve it so he could film later. But it's not really clear precisely when, where and why the phone was switched off. But again, for one reason or another, 28 minutes before arriving at 1:47 PM was the last time a signal was ever detected at Lairg. From this point onwards, Finn was alone and planned to skirt the loch's western shore before veering south to Golspie. At approximately 3:45 PM, a group of motorcyclists, or bikers, reported spotting a man matching Finn's description around 3 miles away from the caravan site. While this is thought to have been Finn, there was no way to know for sure because they didn't know him personally. But it's highly likely to be the case since he was dressed as Finn was. As the afternoon of the 25th transitioned into the evening, Lucy sent a number of messages to Finn and all of them remained unread. After being with Finn for all those years, I'd imagine at that point she'd become somewhat accustomed to the way he probably got immersed in his travels, and she initially likely just thought that he was focused on filming or was perhaps just in an area where there wasn't any phone coverage. From this point onwards, there was no further activity recorded of Finn's. He didn't text anyone, nor post anything on social media. No temporary camp has ever been found to suggest that he tried to establish one. No fires had been lit anywhere near the loch either. There were no pieces of discarded equipment anywhere. Somehow, Finn had disappeared and left behind no trace of himself whatsoever. The following day, Saturday the 26th of March, passed without any reported sightings or communications from Finn. Lucy trusted his skills and remained optimistic, but obviously there was now a growing unease as the day progressed, and she was still not hearing any word from him. By this point, according to Finn's plans, he should have been around midway to the beach and could have been camping near the forests south of the loch. By midday on Sunday the 27th of March, which was now Mother's Day, Finn had not returned as promised. Obviously, Lucy's anxiety escalated, especially as the day went on, and now at 6:30 PM she began to phone around friends and family. It seems that her delay in reporting him missing was as a result of normalcy bias, which is the idea that everything is usually okay, therefore everything will be okay. This is something every person can and will likely deal with at some point unless you are aware of it beforehand. You have this situation in which perhaps something serious is happening or has happened, but these internal thoughts of logic delay an appropriate response. Still, on the morning of the 28th, Lucy called his workplace to see if he'd turned up there, and it was confirmed that he had not shown up. Lucy made the point that while she was feeling very concerned by this time, she also had a feeling of embarrassment if it turned out to be a false alarm. She said, Even then, I still felt ridiculous. I was sure that I was overreacting. All but certain the police would meet him on his walk and he would laugh. Are you for real? He's like a cat. He always lands on his feet and always comes home. But I also couldn't help thinking, what if something has actually happened? Has he had an accident? What else could have gone on? Looking back, I probably went into a state of shock, unable to make sense of his absence. At this point, she did call the police though. Officers responded very quickly by all accounts and visited their home to get a grasp of his route, what he had planned to do, and where exactly he planned to be. This immediate response initiated what would become one of the most intensive searches in the Highlands. Authorities mobilised swiftly and launched a multi-agency operation focused on the expansive area around the place he was dropped off, and then between Loch Naver and Golspie. The authorities brought in helicopters, specialised mountain rescue teams, Coast Guard units, specialist divers for the loch and other nearby waters. They also brought in professional canine units, hoping to find an obvious scent trail that would lead them right to his position. I'd imagine that the hope must have been that he was just sitting somewhere injured, waiting for rescue. This did not seem to be the case though, and the dogs never found a scent anywhere. The search went on for between 3 to 4 weeks, employing drones for inaccessible areas and also thermal imaging cameras, which found absolutely no trace of Finn whatsoever. By the 31st of March, he had been missing for 6 days. Still, nothing had been found, and Lucy issued a public appeal through the BBC. As despite the comprehensive search that was taking place, no traces were emerging anywhere. As this Medium article puts it, it was as if he vanished into thin air. Authorities never found a campsite, there were no clothing fragments or dropped equipment anywhere that they could find, and otherwise no sign of distress was present either. The official search began to wind down in mid-April, though obviously the case remained open, and the police posted a formal appeal on their website. With the official search coming to an end, and having uncovered absolutely nothing at all, Finn's family assumed direct leadership of the effort, unwilling to just give up hope. His father, Mark, committed to searching the mountains and other areas of the Highland 3 to 4 days a week. He would often camp on site and would share updates on social media. Lucy helped to amplify visibility through media appearances, including Vanished, the hunt for Britain's missing people, and through that she was able to reach millions of people. As a result of this, more private resources came in with cadaver dogs and divers, but like the official search effort, and then Mark's efforts too, they yielded nothing. Some find this next part a little odd. 18 months after the initial disappearance, in late October of 2023, deer stalkers came across a rucksack on the bank of Loch Naver, very close to Finn's initial drop-off point. This turned out to be Finn's green rucksack. In an article by the Northern Times, it states, Mark said, as you know, Finn went missing 18 months ago on his hike from Loch Naver to Golspie, and despite searching the hills for all that time, we found no clues to him being there. That was the case up to 2 weeks ago when a couple of deer stalkers on their way to work at Loch Naver came across Finn's rucksack at the side of Loch Naver. And after a close inspection of the rucksack and its belongings and a few other items that we can't really get into, we now believe that Finn attempted to swim the loch in order to cut his journey time somewhat to the coast. Finn is a really strong swimmer and a good wild swimmer, but for reasons that we don't know about, we fear that he may not have made the swim. Police divers have been down last week and they searched the area where the rucksack was found and his possible start point, and they came up with nothing. It's not clear what these other items were that Mark was referring to. What was being suggested though was that the particularly warm temperature that day, that was ideal for hiking, might have been somewhat deceptive. It could have masked the fact that despite these temperatures, the lochs can often sit in single digits Celsius despite the warmer air temperatures. So the loch could have been sitting at around 48 Fahrenheit or lower at a max of 9 Celsius. So the question is whether or not Finn knew of those kinds of risks. Given his knowledge and skill set, I have seen some people suggest that he likely would have known that to be the case. As stated, he was a proficient wild swimmer, and either he didn't know the risks associated with the lochs being dangerously cold, or he could have just completely underestimated the water's chill at that time. It's difficult to say for sure what this might have looked like, but Mark wondered if he had attempted to swim across the loch to save time. So if that really was what happened, it could be the case that as he'd got in the water, he started to swim further out into the loch, and at some point he began to suffer from hypothermia, where he succumbed to it. If that water was intensely cold, he could have suffered from cold water shock. The moment you hit that cold water, the body instinctively gasps for air. Obviously, if your head is underwater at the time, you can see where that might lead. If he hadn't realised that it was too cold initially, thought it was fine, and then swam out further into the water, we do know that the cold can cause circulatory vessels to constrict. That sudden shift can put a strain on the heart and trigger a heart attack, which is among the absolute worst things that could possibly happen while out swimming in a loch. Aside from heart attacks, other possibilities here could lie in the fact that if you don't quite realise it's too cold fast enough, muscles and nerves can start to lose function very quickly. This can quite literally lead to paralysis in the middle of swimming. It is important to note too that the only evidence to suggest that he might have swam was the fact that they found his rucksack on the bank, which it seems odd anyway that it was found 18 months after he vanished, especially since it was so close to the point that he'd been dropped off. You'd like to think that given that, it would have been uncovered at the time he went missing. There seems to be a lot of uncertainty surrounding the rucksack. Was it there the whole time? Many seem to suggest that to be the case, and that it was just missed initially because it was in an overgrown area. Others propose that it may have entered the water during a mishap and then at a later time washed ashore. It was never mentioned if it had any water damage, but for it to just reappear right next to the point that it disappeared feels a little coincidental, since it could have been swept away anywhere. Of course, his family seem to think that the rucksack was intentionally placed there by Finn himself right before he tried to swim across the loch as a kind of shortcut. There's something about the logistics of that people have found a little odd. If you were going to swim across the loch, wouldn't you have to essentially abandon the rucksack and therefore everything, or at least some things that were inside, to get across? What would be the point in that? Why set off on this hike to immediately decide that you're going to leave behind the rucksack, equipment, and everything else that you'd taken to swim across a cold lake? Or, I suppose, because we don't know exactly what was still inside the rucksack upon being found, he could have placed the items he wanted to take into some kind of waterproof container to get across. It's really not understood as to what was going on there. It is important to say though, that following the discovery of the rucksack, searchers refocused their efforts on the loch. And again, as was the case for all of the other searches made for him, no body nor items were found in the water. It's difficult to know what to make of that. Do you think he swam across? The second idea that I came across was that of a voluntary disappearance to start a new life, though it seems incredibly unlikely to me. Some have discussed whether Finn might have wanted to leave his life behind and go live off-grid. He had a deep affinity for nature after all, and seemed to hold a skepticism of modern society. There are those who have suggested that he might have embraced some kind of remote existence in the Highlands somewhere. I suppose if one did want to live remote enough, perhaps you really could evade detection for years with the right skill set. It has been pointed out that his phone was turned off somehow unusually early, despite the fact that he would normally be using it for camera work. And of course, because of the message that he left Lucy over voicemail, that only furthered speculations that it was actually a goodbye message. The counter-arguments to this are the fact that it was known that he was devoted to his family. He also had a thriving business and potentially a very bright future on YouTube too. His videos were actually very well done. As far as I can tell, there were no financial or relational issues. His family just also couldn't envision a scenario in which he would have wanted to cause such prolonged pain for everyone. And so, I suppose, that was one of the reasons they felt an accident was more likely in the first place. The other idea surrounding a voluntary disappearance links to the mental health challenges that he'd once had with certain struggles. I don't want to linger on this one too much, only to say that there has been speculation that he might have wanted to vanish. The family, on the other hand, vehemently counters this. Lucy addressed this point and referenced Nicola Bulley's disappearance, stating about Finn that a mental health crisis this was not. That was probably spurred on by some of the comments made by the police about Nicola, blaming the entire thing on menopause. I could sit here and rant about the police's handling of Nicola Bulley's case for the next 30 minutes, so I'll spare you that and instead link you to my coverage of Nicola in the top right now and in the description below. It's also important to say too that Lucy said that there was no physical evidence of any kind of a purposeful disappearance taking place. There wasn't any writing or messages or anything else that might point in that direction, and according to everyone, Finn had a very positive outlook on life. Beyond an accident in the water, others have speculated about perhaps getting lost and falling into a bog or having some kind of medical incident while filming somewhere else. The terrain is very rugged and there are some quick drop-offs in areas like this. However, that idea doesn't seem particularly likely though, because his rucksack was quite literally found next to the loch. So I'm not really sure how you'd go about trying to explain that while saying he disappeared in another area entirely. That brings us to the final idea that's been thrown around. I should point out that there is no real evidence in favour of this, but some people have speculated about foul play. He did get dropped off on a road in a very remote area. Is it possible that while hiking, after he'd been spotted by the bikers at 3:45 PM, some opportunistic person that had particularly bad intentions drove by and something happened in a moment like that? Of course, something like that is always possible, but there were no signs of a struggle or anything like that. There's also a very low crime rate in areas like this. Though I suppose the argument would suggest, in this instance, it could explain why the bag was found after so long, because someone could have placed it there to make it look like he went into the water. In addition to that idea, I've seen some people from other countries wonder about animal predation. But of course, we don't have any predators here. Although there does seem to be some ongoing speculation about a small population of large cats roaming the UK. I don't really know anything about that though, or what the evidence is to suggest it might be the case. If such a thing was true, and animal predation did take place, it is very likely that the search effort, specifically the search dogs, would have found that scene. Because it's not as if it's hidden. Scenes like that, to put it vaguely, are usually a scatter. Despite years passing, there has never been any new clues or leads outside of the discovery of the rucksack. On the 3rd anniversary of the day that he vanished into the Highlands, on the 25th of March 2025, Lucy announced, "3 years since we have all last seen Finn. I hope that he is at peace. The search for Finn has concluded, and we as a family have started our healing journey. Rest easy, Finn Creaney, always in our memories." As of the current time, on the 15th of October 2025, Finn remains officially missing, with no body or trace ever recovered. Charities like Missing People continue sporadic appeals, but the case has largely transitioned from an active search to remembrance. In the end, it's not really understood what happened to him. And with that, that also brings us to the end of this. Please do remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for the channel. And also to like the video and hype it if you can, I'd be very grateful. Or a dislike if you disliked it. I'd just like to thank you for watching, and a really big thank you to the patrons who've been running around on the screen. Be safe all, peace.